Hello, my name is Ariel, like the mermaid, and in this video I'm going to respond to a message that was sent to me from a genderqueer person who wants some advice on how to explain their identity to their mother. And so in this video I'm going to both address genderqueer people that might be having a similar issue and maybe struggling with dealing with their parents, and also I'm going to address parents of genderqueer or just other non-binary or trans kids that, and generally how to be supportive to your genderqueer, trans, non-binary kid. Okay, so first off, a lot of times, particularly as a non-binary identifying trans person, it can be very difficult dealing with parents, and personally, from my experiences, have not been very good. But I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it, and one of them, unfortunately, is a lot of times you might have to make some compromises. Like, you might have to agree, okay, I'll be able to wear this to school, but I will go to church and wear something else. Unfortunately, you shouldn't have to make these compromises. It's completely unfair, but sometimes you have to make compromises that are unfair until you can finally be free of your parents and just get away. Sometimes that's unfortunately the reality. Sometimes you have to figure out what will work with your parents, and you have to feel out what your parents are like and how reasonable they're willing to be. Fortunately, the person who sent the message, it seems like their mother is at least trying and making an effort to be supportive. So, I mean, I don't know, I would just, in that case, I'd just encourage, communicate what you need for your parents to support you. Just, tell them, and, hopefully, as long as you make it very clear that this is not just like an optional thing, that it's something that you really need for you to feel supported by them, hopefully they'll eventually figure out how to be respectful to you. A big thing that you have to recognize with parents and dealing with parents is a lot of times there's a huge generation gap, and there are parents that are in very different levels. Like, there's some parents that are like won't even acknowledge that homosexuality is a thing. There's parents that won't acknowledge that bisexuality is a thing. There's parents that don't understand transgender issues, but then maybe there's parents that really think they know about transgender issues and LGBT issues, but really don't know that much, and like don't understand, certainly like don't understand non-binary, and be like, well, wait a second, if you're, a transgender, wouldn't that mean you'd want to be this? Like a lot of parents don't understand, and I think sometimes, unfortunately, you have to be patient and you have to let them figure it out. And again, unfortunately, this is stuff that you shouldn't have to go through. But again, you have to, sometimes when you're dealing with your parents, you have to make some compromises, and that's the way it is. I mean, certainly when you're making compromises with your parents, don't make a compromise that's doesn't make you feel comfortable. I mean, for one, a lot of times if you're transgender and your parents are supportive to you from the beginning, they might want to have a say if you choose if you want to have a different name. Not everyone necessarily has to change their name if you're transgender, but if you're transgender and you want to change your name, a lot of times like parents want to have like a say in what your new name is. I mean, that's an issue. I mean, I would say that at least consider some of your parents. If they want to be involved in the process and they're trying to be supportive, then that's a good thing, and don't just completely dismiss them. But at the end of the day, it's your name, and it's going to be what you have people call you. So, don't just let your preferred name be something that you aren't comfortable with but your parents would want you to have. So that's one thing. With me personally, it was all me. I chose my name, and my parents were way too late on the game to have any say on what my preferred name is, and whatever. So, sucks for them if they don't like my name. Okay, so the main thing that the person who sent me the message wanted me to do was try to help them explain what genderqueer is, so that they could more easily explain it to their mother. The problem is that's kind of a difficult thing to do, because genderqueer can mean very different things for different people, because all genderqueer people, just like all trans people, are all individuals. And so I'll explain what it means to me, and what it basically means to me. I mean, at the basic level is just that it means that I identify as a gender other than male or female. I don't identify with one of the binary genders. I identify as something else. So what that means is that I prefer that people would not see me as male, or just see me as female. I'd prefer them to see me as something else. And so there's a lot of, now, another side to it for me is gender expression. I personally don't like to dress in a way that is stereotypically expected of my assigned gender. I prefer to wear makeup. A lot of times I like to wear more effeminate clothing, or more like androgynous clothing. So that's part of it too, but I guess that's a bit different. That's not really part of the identity aspect. That's personally my personal preference of how I like to dress. I mean, it is related, I suppose, sometimes for some people, because a lot of times people want to dress in a way that deliberately that people will be more likely to see them as something other than male or female. But, you know, it's connected, but it's a little bit different. And so genderqueer can mean a lot of things for other people. It can mean, just in general, that they reject the notion of like male and female, or just they kind of just reject gender in general. It can mean that, I mean, and there's different genderqueer people. Some genderqueer people will not necessarily go by, I mean, I personally prefer to go by gender-neutral pronouns in general, or female pronouns, but a lot of genderqueer people might go by male pronouns, female pronouns. You know, there's all sorts of, it's about what makes them comfortable. So you can't just base what's going to be supportive for one genderqueer person based on what would be supportive for me. You know, for me, if I want to be most supported by my parents, or just by people in general, I would want them to refer to me by Ariel, my preferred name. I'd like them to refer to me by my preferred pronouns, either gender neutral or by female pronouns. I'd, you know, prefer them not to refer to me as a man or as a boy. That would be some things that would make me feel comfortable, and I would certainly prefer to feel like I can dress the way I want to without people like making me feel uncomfortable for doing so. So those are some things that would just make me feel comfortable. But it can be different for different genderqueer people, and some genderqueer people, some people who identify as genderqueer, might not dress in a way that that seems, you know, different than what is expected of their assigned gender, and that's fine too. You don't have to dress a certain way just because you're genderqueer. But you know, in general, I think that a lot of times, a lot of genderqueer people might be more drawn to different clothing or whatever. But one thing that you definitely need to understand a lot of times about the trans experience is that a lot of times transgender people experience some sort of dysphoria about their gender, and that can be more like, you know, dysphoria about their body, and it could be, or it could be just in general social dysphoria, just discomfort being referred to as the gender you don't identify as. So you know, there's a lot of different you know, a lot of people, so that you know, you kind of have to figure out what will you know, make you feel more comfortable as yourself. So that might, for some people, for some transgender people, it means that they have to go through physical transition. You know, they have to make some physical changes to themselves so that they feel comfortable in their body. Some people, they just need to dress the way they want. Some people, they maybe just need to you know, be referred to by a different name, or referred to, you know, it, and some transgender people maybe don't necessarily have that much dysphoria, but it's just their preference that they prefer to be referred to in a certain way. And, you know, it depends, but I think most transgender people to some degree have like some degree of dysphoria about their gender. And I think that's an important thing to acknowledge too, and why it's really important to be supportive of transgender people and not just disregard it as something, as like a fad or whatever. Okay, so now I'm gonna talk about basically how to be supportive just in general of a genderqueer person, or just any transgender person. So first off, just respecting their preferred names and pronouns. If they have a name they want to be referred to by, refer to them by that name. If they have certain pronouns that they want you to refer to them by, try your best to refer to them by those pronouns. I know if it's a gender-neutral pronoun that might be difficult, but make the effort, and that will be a good way of supporting them. Just in general, particularly with non-binary people, avoiding gendered speech is a good thing. Like, you know, just in, like, if you're in like a, I don't know, if you're going out as a family and going like, oh, all the, you know, making like observations like, oh, look at all the boys are, you know, let's get all the boys together for a picture, or all the girls together for a, that kind of thing makes, a lot of times, can make genderqueer people, or just in general non-binary people, feel uncomfortable. Another important thing, I think, as a parent of like any sort of transgender kid, providing a safe environment for them to experiment with how they express themselves. So, like, making sure that in your home you make it clear to them that you're not going to judge them, and that they can feel free to try on different clothing and try, you know, whatever. And like, maybe it's going to be clothing that won't necessarily, that they wouldn't, maybe wouldn't feel comfortable with them going out, like in, you know, it maybe wouldn't be a good idea for them to go outside in, but just make sure that your home is like a supportive environment where they can figure out what works, and you know, don't just judge them, and refrain from when they're trying out something, where they're trying out a new shirt or something, or maybe trying out and wearing different makeup or whatever. Make sure, don't like make you know, I mean, be careful about what comments you make about it. Don't, it's not very supportive to be like, oh, well, that one kind of makes your shoulders look weird, or, oh, I mean, there might be a place where if they want your advice that might be good, but just in general, I think there's a stage where you're just trying to figure out what makes you feel comfortable, what you feel comfortable wearing, and that kind of commentary isn't necessarily helpful in an early stage. Eventually it might be, you know, I mean, honestly, if they're planning on going out with something, it might be helpful for them to know that people, if someone might get a certain idea, but be very careful with what kind of comments you make about what someone's wearing, what your a genderqueer or just in general, like a trans kid is wearing. You know, who's your child. Not just, obviously if you're just out and you see a trans kid, don't make random comments, that's just rude. So yeah, and just in general, so being supportive of different clothing choices, that they might want to dress in a way that's more feminine or more masculine or more androgynous. Just in general, support that, you know, and you know, be understanding. And just in general, it's a good idea that if you suddenly know that your kid is maybe questioning their gender identity, or is sure about their gender identity, but they don't identify as cisgender, then it might be a good time to examine your own attitudes about gender, just in general, and like examine, you know, think about, like, you know, if something that your kid wants to do, like, you know, if you know, you have you know, a kid who was assigned male at birth but wants to wear a dress, and that makes you uncomfortable, like, ask yourself why that makes you uncomfortable. Is it because you're scared of other people's reactions, or is it because you just are uncomfortable because you have a certain view of what it means to wear a dress, in, you know, what it means to be female and what it means to be male? So, like, you know, ask yourself why you maybe feel uncomfortable with something, and whether it's really because there is a really good reason to feel uncomfortable, or if it's just because you're so, you have these gender norms very ingrained in your brain. So yeah, an important thing, and again, important thing for me to reiterate is the fact that gender identity and gender expression are two different things. Your identity is how you identify, so if you identify as male, female, non-binary, meaning you don't identify as male or female, that's your identity. Your expression is basically like what you wear, if you wear makeup, how you present yourself, just in general. But even though it's gender identity and gender expression are two different things, it's important that when someone is questioning their gender identity, or has a gender identity that is different from their assigned gender, it's very important that you don't restrict their gender expression. So obviously, like if your kid wants to wear something that you wouldn't even have let them wear, regardless of their gender, I mean, that's understandable to still not let them wear it, but I mean, you might want to question why you don't want them to wear it, if it, maybe isn't really such a big deal, but that is reasonable. But I think if it's something that you would let them wear if they were the opposite sex, then question why you don't want them to wear it, and examine what that is. I think a lot of times parents will hide behind the whole idea of, oh, well, I don't want, their classmates to judge them. I don't want people to judge them. I don't want people to, depending on where you live, that might be a very real concern. Maybe if you don't live in a place that's very supportive, then, you might want to be careful about where your child goes dressed a certain way, because unfortunately we don't live in a place where everyone's accepting and everyone's understanding. There's places full of bigots who will harm people, who don't conform to our cisnormative society. So I mean, safety is sometimes a concern, but sometimes it's something that you hide behind, and I think sometimes it's worth the risk that maybe some people will not be nice to you, if you can be true to yourself. And so I think, and again, I think a lot of times, like for example with my parents, I think that they often will hide behind the whole idea, oh, well, people will judge you and stuff like that, when it's really, they just don't want me to dress this way, and they don't want me to express myself this way because they have their own discomfort with it, that they can't get over it. So, check if it's something like that. Sometimes it might be. Yeah, just in general, question why gender nonconformity makes you uncomfortable. Okay, so just to reiterate, a good way to be supportive to a trans kid is to respect preferred names and pronouns, avoid gendered speech is a good thing, providing a safe environment for them to experiment with how they express themselves, and allowing them to not be restricted in their expression based on their gender. Obviously, you shouldn't necessarily just let your kid wear anything, but if it's something that if the reason why you don't want them to wear something is because of their gender, I would really take some time to examine your attitudes towards gender and ask yourself really why you don't want them to wear it. So that's basically it. Be supportive.